In 2016, Elon Musk publicly mocked Jeff Bezos for treating a suborbital New Shepard booster landing like it was historic. He wrote on social media, "Congrats to Jeff on landing a used rocket of sorts." Musk's implication was that Blue Origin was playing in a different league, incapable of matching the orbital reusability that made SpaceX worth taking seriously. On April 19, 2026, a rocket named Never Tell Me the Odds launched from Cape Canaveral, and that bet may have just expired. When Blue Origin unveiled its plans for New Glenn in 2012, industry analysts were already measuring the distance to SpaceX. That year, SpaceX was preparing its first Falcon 9 reusability tests. By the time New Glenn finally reached the launch pad, SpaceX had achieved more than 200 successful Falcon 9 landings, each one a public demonstration that orbital-class reusability was not just possible, but routine. Blue Origin's progress, in contrast, unfolded behind closed doors. Years passed as engineers worked through engine development, tank qualification, and integration challenges. The BE-4 engine, central to New Glenn's promise, faced its own delays, with hot fire tests and structural trials stretching across a decade. Meanwhile, SpaceX boosters were not only landing, they were flying multiple times, some exceeding 20 missions each. The numbers told their own story: over 200 Falcon 9 landings by January 2025, a cadence of launches that made reusability seem almost ordinary. Blue Origin's timeline, from 2012 to its first orbital attempt in 2025, became a symbol of the credibility gap. Industry observers questioned whether Blue Origin could move beyond suborbital demonstrations and deliver on the harder challenge: recovering and reusing a heavy-lift, orbital-class booster. As each year passed without a successful recovery, the pressure mounted, not just to launch, but to prove that New Glenn could do what only SpaceX had achieved at scale. The market watched, waiting for Blue Origin to cross from ambition to operational reality. On January 16, 2025, Blue Origin's long-awaited New Glenn finally left the pad at Cape Canaveral. The launch carried the Blue Ring Pathfinder payload to orbit, but the mission's most critical test, the recovery of its massive first stage, ended in failure. After stage separation, the booster began its descent toward the Atlantic, targeting the Jacqueline Ocean platform. Telemetry cut out 3 minutes after main engine cutoff. Later analysis confirmed the booster lost attitude control during re-entry, tumbling into the sea and sinking before recovery teams could reach it. No hardware was salvaged. The setback played out in real time across the space industry. Launch logs recorded the booster as unrecovered. News outlets ran headlines questioning whether Blue Origin's decade of development had produced anything beyond a one-way rocket. Engineers inside the company pored over flight data, searching for the cause. Some pointed to guidance system anomalies, others to thermal protection failures. The public narrative, however, was already forming. For all its ambition, Blue Origin had not yet proven it could bring a heavy-lift orbital booster home. This single failure reinforced the skepticism that had dogged New Glenn for years. Unlike the suborbital New Shepard, which had landed successfully multiple times, the challenge of recovering a massive orbital-class stage remained unmet. The credibility gap widened, and the pressure on Blue Origin's team, already working under the shadow of SpaceX's routine landings, grew sharper. The path forward would demand not just another launch, but a demonstration that recovery and reuse were possible at the scale New Glenn promised. November 13, 2025 brought a different outcome for Blue Origin. The second New Glenn mission, NG-2, lifted off from Cape Canaveral carrying NASA's Escapade payload, 2 spacecraft destined for Martian orbit. This time, all eyes were on the booster's return. After stage separation, the first stage initiated its descent toward the Jacqueline recovery platform, stationed in the Atlantic. Telemetry tracked the booster as it navigated atmospheric re-entry, engines firing in a carefully sequenced landing burn. 12 minutes after liftoff, the booster touched down on Jacqueline's deck. The recovery was executed without major incident, and by dawn, engineers had confirmed the stage was intact and secure. Internally, Blue Origin had rated the chance of success at 75%, a cautious but realistic estimate given the complexity of returning a 190-foot, 4,000-ton first stage from orbit. The engineering team's risk models factored in everything from guidance corrections to heat shield integrity. Each data stream from NG-2's descent was scrutinized, confirming that the new thermal protection system and the BE-4 engines performed within expected limits. The landing itself was not just a technical exercise, but a statement. Blue Origin could recover a heavy-lift orbital booster, not just a suborbital demonstrator. For the first time, the company had the hardware and telemetry to support the next step, refurbishment and reflight. The successful NG-2 landing provided tangible evidence that years of development and internal testing had produced a booster capable of surviving the rigors of orbital re-entry. With Escapade delivered to its transfer orbit and the booster secured on Jacqueline, the focus shifted. The challenge now was to prove that this recovered stage could be turned around, refurbished, and launched again, not as a one-off, but as the foundation for a new operational standard. Inside Blue Origin's refurbishment hangar, the New Glenn 2 booster, now designated for New Glenn 3, entered a process that would test every claim the company had made about orbital-class reusability. The clock started on November 14, 2025, the day after recovery. Over the next 156 days, engineers disassembled, inspected, and rebuilt the 190-foot, 4,000-ton stage. The most critical task was removing all 7 BE-4 methane engines. 2 units showed valve seat wear, prompting a full replacement set rather than just an overhaul. Each new engine underwent static fire testing before integration, confirming thrust and chamber pressure within flight limits. This engine swap, while resource-intensive, was necessary to validate the reliability of methane-fueled propulsion under repeated orbital stress. Thermal protection came next. The booster's leading edges and base shield received a full set of upgraded ablative tiles and new ceramic matrix composite blankets. Post-flight analysis from New Glenn 2 had revealed less than 2 millimeters of ablation, well within design tolerances. But Blue Origin opted to replace the most exposed tiles entirely. The goal was to minimize turnaround time for future flights, using modular thermal protection system components engineered for rapid removal and reinstallation. Structural checks followed. Non-destructive ultrasonic scans of the carbon fiber tanks and composite fairings identified minor delamination, which was patched and certified. Avionics and flight software were updated to the latest New Glenn 3 standard, with a full data link calibration before final integration. On April 16, 2026, a 19-second static fire at Launch Complex 36 cleared the booster for flight. 3 days later, on April 19th, New Glenn 3 lifted off, carrying AST SpaceMobile's Bluebird 7 Block 2 payload. The 156-day refurbishment cycle was not a record setter. SpaceX's Falcon 9 had demonstrated 30-day turnarounds for years, but this cycle provided hard proof that Blue Origin could recover, refurbish, and refly an orbital-class booster. Dave Limp, Blue Origin's CEO, addressed the press after the launch, saying, "We are now on a path to a 30-day turnaround for future reflights. The ambition is clear, but the evidence now rests in hardware and flight logs, not just promises. The engineering demonstration is complete. The economic stakes and the question of cadence come next." New Glenn's first stage is built for a different scale of reusability, and that brings its own challenges. Standing 190 feet tall and measuring 23 feet in diameter, The booster is nearly twice as wide as Falcon 9 and towers above most commercial rockets in operation. 7B4 methane engines power this stage, together producing over 17,000 kilonewtons of thrust at liftoff. The result is a vehicle capable of placing up to 45 metric tons into low Earth orbit, triple the payload of Falcon 9, which tops out at about 15 tons. This extra size and mass complicate every aspect of recovery and refurbishment. A heavier stage means more structural stress during re-entry, greater thermal loads, and more demanding requirements for landing precision. The engineering record shows that scaling up reusability is not just a matter of copying what works on a smaller rocket. Each design choice, from diameter to engine count to propellant, carries consequences for how quickly and reliably a booster can return to flight. AST SpaceMobile's Bluebird 7 mission illustrates how commercial stakes have shifted. CEO Abel Avelin, speaking to investors in March 2026, made clear that reliable, repeatable access to orbit is now essential. The company must deploy 45 to 60 satellites by year's end to meet global coverage targets. For Avelin, New Glenn's ability to fly a booster again, demonstrated on NG-3, offers a real path to that cadence. Reuters, reporting on April 19, 2026, highlighted the broader impact. Blue Origin's successful reflight breaks a 9-year monopoly on orbital-class booster reuse, ending SpaceX's exclusive hold on this capability. Analysts now expect commercial launch prices to drop by 5 to 10% as competition intensifies. With SpaceX still holding about 60% of the market, even a modest price cut signals a new era for satellite operators and launch buyers. Orbital reusability is the true test, far harder than suborbital flights and long overdue for Blue Origin. NG-3's successful reflight on a commercial mission narrows the credibility gap, but market trust is not won in a single launch. In this industry, proven reliability, not promises, defines the future.